Has any singular horror film undergone such a reevaluation as Jennifer's Body? While it might be hard to believe today, the film, directed by a horror master, starring A-list actors, and written by an Oscar winner, didn't always carry prestige, even just in horror circles. Panned on release in 2009 as just another piece of teen filler, the movie has steadily built a reputation as a smart, inventive, and decidedly feminist masterpiece over the past decade plus. Only this slow climb to recognition has given Jennifer's Body its current spot as a modern horror classic. But why did this happen? How did this movie slip through the cracks on release, and how did it claw its way back into pop culture relevancy? Furthermore, why does this movie even matter today? What reason has Jennifer's Body for being so relevant today when other horror films of the late 2000s have drifted into complete obscurity? I mean, is the film even deserving of the classic status it's achieved in recent years? Well, to answer these questions, we have to tell the story of Jennifer's Body, from production turmoil to bad marketing to the film itself and the legacy born out of it. There's a lot to unpack here, needless to say, because Jennifer's Body is truly worth our consideration in so many ways. The actual text of the film opens up a lot of conversations in itself, and I definitely could have made a whole video just covering this movie in a vacuum. But to add in everything surrounding the movie is to further develop those existing connections and to begin entirely new ones. I felt with Jennifer's Body especially, it's essential to capture how the movie fits into the bigger pictures of horror cinema, feminism, and cult classic media as a whole. So, welcome to Making Media Matter, and today we're taking a look at one of my all-time personal favorite horror movies, the late 2000s horror comedy masterpiece, Jennifer's Body. Enjoy. Jennifer's Body, like a lot of films, began with a script. Hot off her Best Original Screenplay Oscar for 2006's Juno, Diablo Cody drafted the story of Jennifer Check, her best friend Needy, and the demonic transformation that disrupts both of their lives. It's important to note that Cody wasn't particularly liked by many during this time, and was effectively declared a one-hit wonder for her work on Juno, derided for her hyper-stylized screenplays and use of made-up slang. With hindsight, I think it's all too easy to appreciate the bizarre flow and inherent camp of Cody's writing. Her screenplays read like some strange mix between a 2000s blog post and Aaron Sorkin. But people in 2009 didn't have the luxury of hindsight and largely believed Cody's writing to just be a gimmick. Jennifer's Body was, in many ways, Cody's chance to prove her detractors wrong. She began writing the film as a dark and brooding slasher, something I think we can see clear elements of in many scenes, especially this deleted one where the mother of a dead character gives a speech at his funeral about her grief. But Cody quickly realized the film would have to be part comedy, as jokes just kept finding their way into her script. Personally, I couldn't be happier about this change. I think the comedy of Jennifer's Body is one of the most unique and lovable parts of the film. Without it, the movie would really lose something. That being said though, I do have to wonder what a straight horror version of Jennifer's Body might have looked like. Cody initially chose to write a horror film because she felt the genre carried inherent feminist undertones. She caught on to the archetype of the final girl, a sole female heroine who is often the last one left standing at the end of horror movies, and wanted to mine that concept in a story of her own. Additionally, Cody described lots of horror as being inherently female. Whether they show fear for the feminine or reverence for it, horror movies are so often preoccupied with women, and because of that, Cody saw horror as a perfect place to tell a decidedly feminist story. It's also basically impossible to talk about the script for Jennifer's Body without briefly touching on the 2000 film Ginger Snaps, written by Karen Walton. While Ginger Snaps might lack Diablo Cody's signature snappy and slang-heavy dialogue, the film bears a striking resemblance in both plot and theme to Jennifer's Body. If you've seen the film, you probably understand how impossible it is to deny that Cody was extremely influenced by Ginger Snaps, to the point that Jennifer's Body and Ginger Snaps might as well be labeled sister films. For those of you yet to see Ginger Snaps, I highly encourage you to watch the movie. It's one of my very favorites, and if you like Jennifer's Body, you're almost guaranteed to enjoy it too. In late 2007, Megan Fox was selected to star in Jennifer's Body, and by 2008, Karyn Kusama had been brought on to direct, having made a name for herself previously with movies like 2000's Girl Fight. She also directed the 2006 film Aeon Flux, an adaptation of an MTV cartoon from the 90s of the same name. I mention this because there is a scene from that movie where the main character and a girl with hands for feet have to traverse this base guarded by razor-sharp grass, and I vividly remember seeing my dad watch this on TV when I was very young. I definitely thought I imagined the scene, but in researching for this video, I found it again and happily proved to myself that I'm not fabricating memories. In the lead up to shooting, Jennifer's Body experienced a few minor setbacks, chief among them script leaks and a writer's strike that got filming moved from 2007 to March of 2008. Once filming got underway though, it seems the process went well. All cast members got along, and the central characters even developed a nice bond with one another, especially after having to film for 3 days straight in this nasty swimming pool. According to almost everyone, the film went well, and with a killer script, great direction, and a stellar cast, the movie seemed almost destined to succeed. Sadly, that wouldn't exactly be the case. Probably the most infamous thing about Jennifer's Body is the film's marketing, and for that reason I won't dwell on it all too much here, but any analysis of the film is really incomplete without at least a passing analysis of the marketing disaster it experienced. From its inception, Jennifer's Body was intended to be a film for teenage girls, tackling themes of puberty, womanhood, and feminine competition. And all through production, that mission remained constant. The film fulfilled what it set out to do and would have likely been pretty successful among teenage girls, the same type who turned up to see the previous films written by Diablo Cody, and maybe even some Twilight fans hounding for horror-tinged high school stories. But instead of leaning into the intended audience of Jennifer's Body and marketing the film as a Diablo Cody written high school horror comedy, the studio chose to market it as a Megan Fox is sexy vehicle for teenage boys. And the marketing was really bad. Like, the studio suggested Megan Fox make a faux porn website to market the movie levels of bad. As one might expect, this marketing campaign alienated the girls the movie was made for, giving them the idea that the film wasn't for them, and also alienated the boys the studio tried to market to, as they were disappointed when their hot demon girl movie turned out to be an introspective feminist horror comedy. And partially because of this bad marketing, and partially because of the critics just misunderstanding the movie, reviews for Jennifer's Body weren't good. Most critics derided the film as a forgettable piece of horror trash when marred by unnatural dialogue and stilted acting. They failed to get the camp genius of the movie and really failed to delve deeper into the messages within. Roger Ebert, a famous critic of the era who actually enjoyed the film, only gave it a 3 out of 5 stars and branded it as Twilight for boys. Like, girl, did we even see the same movie? In my view, Jennifer's Body is one of the most inventive and amazing late 2000s horror films, period, and its commercial and critical failure upon release is nothing short of devastating. The sheer amount of thought and effort put into this film is almost unmatched anywhere else, and to even begin unraveling the genius of Jennifer's Body would take probably about an hour of in-depth critical analysis. Okay, fine. I guess we'll do like a really extensive breakdown of all the deeper messages and themes in Jennifer's Body, but you guys really forced my hand on this one, honestly. Okay, but wait, before we dive into the actual substance of Jennifer's Body, I think it's only right we give a recap of the film for audience members who either have never seen it and don't care about spoilers, or for those who just can't really remember what happened in the movie. And sorry if you're not really interested in a breakdown. I mean, be my guest and skip to this time code in the video if you want to just fast forward through it, but I have to look out for all my viewers, especially the ones who aren't really familiar with this masterpiece. So let's get into it. Jennifer's body begins chronologically at the film's end, with our main character Needy locked in a mental hospital and reflecting on her past. She lashes out at a caregiver and gets locked in solitary confinement, pushing us into a memory from the before times, a memory where Needy attended a pep rally and looked adoringly at her childhood best friend, Jennifer. From there, she gives us a rundown of life back then. She lived in Devil's Kettle, Michigan, so named for a whirlpool at the base of a local waterfall that seemingly flows into an abyss. Pretty spooky stuff. She had a boyfriend named Chip, a librarian-type aesthetic, and of course, a best friend named Jennifer Check. One day, Jennifer invites Needy to see the local performance of a D-tier rock band from the city named Low Shoulder. While she's initially apprehensive, Needy is pressured into going by Jennifer, and the pair meet up later that night to see the show. They make their way to the local bar where the concert is being held, run into a surprised Chris Pratt, and then chat with Low Shoulder before the show. Jennifer tries flirting with the lead singer, and while she goes to grab drinks, Needy overhears the band speculating on Jennifer's virgin status. She gets upset and confronts them about it, telling them quite falsely that yes, Jennifer is a virgin and would never have sex with men like them. She tries to pull Jennifer away, but the band start playing, and Jennifer seems to be almost hypnotized by their performance. Very suspicious. So then the entire bar burns down in a fiery disaster that leaves multiple people dead. Needy and Jennifer barely make it out alive, and as they sit on the ground processing the situation, the lead singer from Low Shoulder comes up and coerces Jennifer to get in his van. She passively accepts, and Needy, still in complete shock, watches her best friend get driven away in the van of these creeps. Needy then rushes home, calls her boyfriend to tell him about what happened, and then hangs up the phone when she hears noises coming from downstairs. She finds Jennifer covered in blood and trying to tear through a rotisserie chicken in her fridge. Jennifer pukes out some black sludge and then intimidates Needy before leaving just as fast as she arrived. The next day at school, Jennifer is in class looking better than ever. She snaps at Needy for asking about the previous night and openly mocks the people who died in the fire, even though her school is absolutely devastated by the loss. Later that day, Jennifer talks to Jonas, the friend of one of the local jocks who died in the fire, and she tells him that his friend's last wish was for she and him to be together. Jonas is understandably weirded out by this lie, but still proceeds with Jennifer to the woods, where she leads him on before turning full succubus and devouring him. His body is quickly discovered, but Jennifer is too busy taking a relaxing dive to be all too bothered by that. Over the next few months, Devil's Kettle grieves its lost citizens, and Low Shoulder's song, Through the Trees, becomes their unofficial anthem of rebuilding. But while the town is healing, Jennifer is looking worse than ever, her skin becoming oily and her hair matted. She complains about her appearance to Needy in the hall after class until a local boy named Colin asks her on a date. Jennifer tells him to stop by her house later that night, and the scene ends with Chip inviting Needy over for some definitely not sex. Later that evening, Needy and Chip have sex, while Jennifer lures Colin into an abandoned house where she, of course, eats him alive. Needy leaves her late-night hookup after getting some creepy visions of Jennifer and Jonas taking off in her mom's car to find Jen. She sees Jennifer stumble out onto the road covered in blood and nearly crashes the car before losing sight of her. Jennifer then leaps onto the windshield, scaring Needy into driving back home. Needy rushes inside and quickly heads to bed, but surprise, Jennifer is lying there waiting for her. Needy freaks out, but then Jennifer starts kissing her and everything gets really gay before Needy snaps out of it and rightfully starts asking why Jennifer is even there. Jennifer says she wants to explain some things to Needy, probably half to cover her tracks and half because she just wants her friend back. And then Jennifer proceeds to tell the truth of what happened on the night of the fire. After she got in Low Shoulder's van, they took her into the wilderness and sacrificed her in a demonic ritual to gain fame. They tossed the evidence into the Devil's Kettle whirlpool and left her body there, not knowing that, since Jennifer wasn't really a virgin, their ritual led her to be possessed by a demonic entity that must eat people to sustain itself. Needy is shocked and horrified, and Jennifer leaves out the window feeling pretty upset by her reaction. In the following weeks, the school prepares for a big Through the Trees themed dance, while Needy herself studies up on demon lore and figures out how to kill a succubus, stabbing it through the heart. She tells Chip that the dance will be feeding ground for Jennifer and that they shouldn't go together because it will make him target number one. Chip feels pretty sad about this, but after everything is said and done, he still ends up going to the dance, just staying outside unbeknownst to Needy, who monitors everything from indoors. Jennifer catches up to Chip and obviously attempts to seduce him, semi-succeeding after she tells some lies about Needy cheating on him. The pair make their way to an abandoned pool house, and after Needy senses something wrong, she runs there only to catch Jennifer already in the act of feeding. She jumps in and tries to rescue Chip, finally standing up to Jennifer. Chip impales Jennifer with a metal rod, and she, again, leaves through the window. Chip then dies in Needy's arms, prompting Needy to get revenge. She suits up in her best home invasion outfit, bursts through Jennifer's window, and after a bit of a tussle, ultimately stabs Jennifer through the heart. Jennifer's mom walks in at the last second, because of course she does, and Needy is then taken to a mental ward, bringing our story full circle. She reveals that having been bitten by Jennifer, she gains some of her powers, only without the need to eat others to sustain them. Needy uses her abilities to break free and wanders to a highway where she finds the murder weapon used to kill Jennifer from the film's start. She embarks on a mission to murder Low Shoulder, and the film cuts to credits. Over the credits, we see stills of Low Shoulder partying and then crime scene photos of the band all dead, Needy having found them and gotten her vengeance. So there's your little summary of Jennifer's Body for anyone who needed it. And understanding the narrative of the film, I think it's high time we get into the deeper messages and themes of the movie that make the plot matter so much in the first place. Hell is a teenage girl. Those are the words that open Jennifer's Body, and outside of being beautifully poetic in the most 2009 of ways, they actually touch on one of the film's most important themes, the struggles of female adolescence. It might be unsurprising that a film written by, directed by, and starring women touches on some commonalities of the female experience, but the nuance of the film's commentary demands we still take a deeper look. Now, I've already done a fairly comprehensive dive into the monstrous puberty of Jennifer's Body and what I think that means through both a queer and feminist lens in my video on the queer subtext of body horror, so I won't dwell on things I've already discussed here. But, in summary, the central transformation of Jennifer's Body is an allegory for puberty first and foremost. I think that much is apparent. Jennifer is, after all, an adolescent, and the film sees her thrust into a world where her body is rapidly changing in unwanted ways. The parallels are obvious. To curb the effects of her transformation, Jennifer devours men, an action we might read as a metaphor for finding self-validation during puberty through meaningless sex that hurts oneself and potential partners. The protagonist of the film, Needy, is the opposite of Jennifer, a shy, quiet girl who originally admires Jennifer and sees her life as desirable in more ways than one, but ultimately comes to understand the harmful nature of Jennifer's reality and destroy the toxic form of puberty embodied through Jennifer post-transformation. Needy, like Jennifer, ends the film having endured a monstrous pubescent transformation of sorts, inheriting some of Jennifer's powers through a bite. But Needy doesn't retain the harmful and toxic attributes of Jennifer, entirely lacking Jennifer's need to feed on others. Instead, Needy uses her powers to her own advantage, getting revenge on the boys who sacrificed Jennifer at the start of the film. It's a commentary on how puberty can become something we as women weaponize and gain empowerment through when we don't let it consume us. And that's basically the gist of puberty in Jennifer's Body, but if we choose to dive a bit deeper, we can actually unravel much more about the film. Jennifer's transformation, while an abrupt departure from her true self, is subtextually fueled by her personality in general. She, even before being sacrificed, seeks to uplift herself by preying on men, albeit in a much less literal way. Jennifer discusses men as tasty morsels, claims potential sexual targets, and shows signs of jealousy for her friend's male partner. It's even suggested that a lot of Jennifer's actions pre-transformation are a performance to gain male validation. I mean, the way she dumps herself down when flirting, exaggerates and sexualizes her movements as though there's some invisible male gaze around her, it all reinforces this idea that the real Jennifer is hiding behind a disguise, desperately hoping to be noticed and liked, particularly by men, feeding off their attention in a way. Her transformation comes as an extension of her natural existence. Post her succubus revival, Jennifer very literally must feed on men to uplift and strengthen herself. Potential partners become conquest entirely in service of Jennifer. She practices a philosophy not dissimilar to that of the men who initially sacrificed her, one wherein other people are merely vehicles for self-advancement. I mentioned this in my body horror video, but now seems like a great time to highlight that Jennifer's murder directly evokes the imagery of sexual assault. fault. And the fact that Jennifer never truly gets revenge, only feeding on the innocent, speaks to how patterns of abuse can perpetuate themselves indefinitely, hurting people for all eternity. But it's also worth considering how Jennifer's actions were informed by her social conditioning as a whole. While Jennifer's actions are undeniably wrong, it's not hard to see how a sexist world led her to toxic behavior. When you're raised to feel as though your self-worth is entirely based on how attractive or desirable men see you to be, a transformation like that which Jennifer endures, or like puberty, when your body becomes harder to maintain, can push you to cope in negative ways, as Jennifer definitely does. It's a reality that almost every girl must grapple with, and while Jennifer embodies an all too real example of how puberty and bad social conditioning can lead to horrible results, her best friend Needy acts as a healthy alternative. Needy has of course been conditioned to judge herself in all the same ways as Jennifer, but before the film even starts, she's been able to reject some of that harmful conditioning. She doesn't seek popularity and doesn't chase after boys for validation. In fact, some of her only truly harmful traits come directly from her proximity to Jennifer, as she frequently looks for the validation of Jennifer and seeks to impress her to an unhealthy extent. But once Needy is able to cut off the toxic codependency she's built with Jennifer, she's able to boldly and confidently move into the next chapter of her life. The world isn't somehow better or easier to navigate, but Needy has the strength and understanding to get through it regardless. I think a telling symbol of the film's commentary on adolescence is the titular Devil's Kettle whirlpool of the town in which the movie is set. It initially presents as something scary, something unknowable, much like puberty itself. It's only at the film's end that the mysterious nature of the whirlpool is dispelled, as Needy finds where it eventually spits out all that it consumes. It's only upon bringing this nebulous and unknowable thing into the light and understanding it firsthand that we can dispel the power it holds over us. Same goes for puberty, and Jennifer's body functions as an ideal way to dispel some of the fear and nerves that so many have around adolescent transformations in general. Puberty doesn't need to be this thing we incessantly fear and constantly dread for our entire young life. It should just be some natural part of the world, when we don't let consume us entirely. And if we make peace with puberty, come to understand it as a normal extension of ourselves, we can use it to our own advantage and come out the other side of it stronger than ever before. But puberty isn't the only thing that Jennifer's body seeks to analyze in terms of female adolescence. The film also seeks to explore the complex relationships and rivalries that form between women, especially during youth. While Jennifer and Needy are best friends and have been for most of their lives, there's always been this semi-rivalry between the two, one reflected in how Jennifer pushes Needy around and how Needy mindlessly follows her every command. That rivalry is representative of a larger competition women feel between one another in real life, and I think Megan Fox, in a behind-the-scenes feature for Jennifer's Body, explained the struggle of girl-on-girl competition better than I ever could. She said, quote, "Women are in constant competition with one another. Always, even when they love each other. And this female competition is most present in youth, when girls are navigating the messy realities of growing up and having their identities reduced to sexual objects for men. When you're young and impressionable, hearing that your worth is defined by your ability to make others happy, specifically guys, of course you're going to feel immense competition with your female friends. They come to represent adversaries to your self-worth, possible obstacles on your path to affirmation. We see this most obviously in Jennifer's Body via Jennifer's weird fixation on Needy's boyfriend Chip. Jennifer repeatedly draws Needy away from Chip, and after her transformation, Jennifer begins directly trying to pursue Chip romantically. When Jennifer succeeds in seducing Chip towards the finale and ultimately kills him, it's the final straw for Needy, who immediately takes action to kill Jennifer. Yes, this is because Jennifer ate her boyfriend, like, duh, but it's also because Jennifer has irreversibly crossed the line of feminine competition. She now solely exists to dominate others, even those she once called her friends. In that way, the film can also be read as a warning about the dangers of falling into feminine competition as brought about by adolescence. Jennifer is consumed by it, while Needy largely avoids it, but still experiences a great deal of pain because of Jennifer's actions. It's these two central themes, those of adolescent transformation and feminine competition, that make up the bulk of puberty commentary and Jennifer's Body. But even beyond girlhood, there's so much to unpack with this film. Enter the film's queer commentary. So we've already touched on the dominating sexuality Jennifer asserts in the film. Her transformation is one that leads her to blindly pursue and consume others in either a very suggestive or obviously sexual manner. But note that I say others there and not just men. That's because toward the middle of the film, Jennifer pays a visit to her bestie Needy, and the two share an extremely sexual, explicitly queer kiss. This kiss has been the subject of so much discourse and makes the sexual tension between Jennifer and Needy that dominates the whole film undeniable. From the first moment Jennifer and Needy share the screen, there's an implied chemistry and attraction. I mean, the film begins with Needy voyeuristically looking at Jennifer's body through a window. That scene is, of course, a bit misleading, trying to use the language of predatory gazing on screen to make us assume Jennifer is the victim here, when in actuality she's just committed multiple murders. But that doesn't discount the sexual connotation present in the moment. The next scene of Jennifer and Needy together has them longingly staring at one another before another girl butts in and tells Needy she's totally gay for Jennifer. Not much subtlety there. And beyond even those instances, there's just so much queerness throughout the movie to unpack. From this hand-holding at the low shoulder performance to this intimate and charged confrontation between Needy and Jennifer in Needy's home. And that kiss brings it all to the forefront, crystallizing the lesbian subtext as just text. If Jennifer's Body was just a great movie with lesbian stuff thrown in for fun, I wouldn't really have any issues. But the genius of the film is in how it mines this queer angle for rich commentary. What's most important to recognize amidst all the sapphic imagery of the film is the present contrast between Needy's queer sexuality and Jennifer's queer sexuality. Needy is soft and gentle, she expresses her affection in subtle gestures and longing stares, yet Jennifer, in line with her sexually dominant persona, expresses her queer sexuality in an overpowering way. In the film's titular kissing scene, the camera closes in on Needy and Jennifer locking lips in an extremely voyeuristic type of way. We'll touch more on the ideas present in the scene in our next chapter, but it's important to note here the falsity of this moment, the forced nature of it all. This isn't a kiss between girlfriends. This is a carefully posed, rehearsed, and documented moment of lesbian sexuality. It's one of the rare points where the film feels like it might actually be catering to men, presenting this very natural part of queer female love in such an unnatural way, maximized for viewers, but not for the participants. But that's very much deliberate. Jennifer is bent on making herself into a sexual object, on trying to find validation by exploiting herself and others. Her brand of sexuality is predatory in nature, and because of that, when she kisses Needy, the moment becomes predatory. The filmmakers use a history of lesbian exploitation on screen to show us that. Obviously, it's bad for Jennifer to be killing boys, but in the context of this being a film, I think her devouring of men, who so often end up stripping women of their autonomy and value on screen, is kind of empowering and enjoyable. But it's in this scene, when Jennifer's consumption and sexuality becomes really just icky and uncomfortable, that the film is able to draw a line in the sand and really convince us, the audience, that what Jennifer is doing is wrong. Her misguided attempts at finding validation and strength in predatory sex are harming herself and others in a noticeable way. And this message is compounded elsewhere in the movie. At the end of the film, when Needy kills Jennifer, it's displayed as a profoundly sexual scene. Needy resorting to the same type of dominant and sexually coded violence as Jennifer to defeat the demon succubus that her friend has transformed into. After Jennifer dies and Needy proves triumphant, the victory feels so hollow, in large part because of how it was achieved. Needy resorts to Jennifer's type of reductive, violent sexuality, the kind that she fought so heavily against for the whole film, and the type that was used to minimize and harm her. Jennifer's color returns to her in death, and the audience is just left to wonder what might have been if these two women had ended the brutal cycle of sexist conditioning that ultimately consumed their lives and led to the fracturing of their relationship. Particularly, we are left to wonder what might have been if the pair had just made good on their suggested lesbian romance, instead of letting the ills of their surrounding world tear them apart. There was something there, that much is obvious, but the movie doesn't get to end in some happy, truthful, and gentle expression of lesbian love. It ends in a painful version of it. In the end, Jennifer's brand of toxic queer sexuality, one motivated by the type of sexist world we touched on in the prior chapter, overpowers ignored Needy's true love for her. It's heartbreaking, and I'm really happy the film doesn't end there because it might have destroyed me if it had. But even that being said, it's not like we get any other healthy queer relationship here. We're just left to sit with this failed one, and no amount of revenge can fix that. So in a way, the shitty conditioning, unhealthy competition, and sexist worldview that pushed Jennifer towards toxic queer sexuality in the first place did kind of triumph. It shows us how growing up as a woman and grappling with things like puberty and social pressures can directly impact queer romance. Woman-on-woman competition ends budding queer partnerships the same way it ends friendships, and the social pressures women feel to make themselves appealing to men and to settle down in heteronormative relationships can spell doom for any remaining queerness still intact past that point. Beyond even that, there is so much commentary to be found here, especially in the ending, about the struggle of lesbian relationships at all points of life under a system of patriarchy. Author Sabrina Gildosi, in an article on Jennifer's Body for Cinemedia, focuses a lot on the idea of Jennifer and Needy as embodying different forms of feminism. Needy, a more conservative extension of feminist thought who believes she'll prevail through determination and smarts alone, and Jennifer, a more militant extension of feminist thought, advocating complete separation from men as a whole, what we refer to as separatist feminism. Both these ideologies, while different, suggest a freer and more comfortable future for our female leads. Most importantly for this section of the video, they suggest realities wherein our protagonist can escape the pressures and constraints of a sexist and homophobic world and fall in love with one another. And the conclusion of the film neatly brings together the threads laid out thus far to give us a potent message about the state of queer sexuality and women's liberation in general under the thumb of a misogynistic world. As Gildosi writes, quote, "Over the course of Jennifer's Body, we see different examples of feminist representation. However, it is at the end that we get the auteur's point of view. Nobody wins in the discussion of who's a better feminist. Jennifer's approach led to violence and death and didn't truly achieve revenge in the end. Needy's attempt to stop this violence led her to violence herself, killing Jennifer with her own hands. And even then, they could not live out the separatist lesbian fantasy that could have been. Lipstick, separatist, or conservative feminisms, none thrive, none survive ultimately. The allure of the woman will always be a complication. No matter age, no matter situation, no matter ideology, the patriarchal system we live under will always try to limit women, especially queer women. And it's impossible to go through life as a queer woman without getting at least bent by this world of sexism in some type of way. I know personally, for me, I often adhere to a more traditional type of femininity because being queer is already a transgression in the eyes of others, and we live in a very X number of strikes and you're out type of world. Being queer is definitely a strike against me, and so is being a woman, so I often limit myself for safety. Jennifer's Body understands that reality for queer women, and while the ending is pretty sad in a few ways when we understand it as queerness and womanhood losing to a messed up world, I do think the movie makes a powerful point in its bleak finale nonetheless. And I mean, all the revenge stuff is still pretty satisfying. To again quote from Gildosi's article, "Perhaps the epilogue revenge scene we get in the credits shows that there will always be bloodshed in a woman's fight. Since there is no right way to fight for women's rights, it might just mean we have to take them, blood, gore, and all." So Jennifer's Body, with its lesbian subtext, cleverly comments on the struggles inherent to queer womanhood. If Needy represents a healthy type of queerness and Jennifer represents an unhealthy type, then the ending can be read as a comment on how hard it is to fight for good queer sexuality amidst the pressures of social sexism. If Needy is conservative feminism and Jennifer is progressive, then the ending speaks to how neither can truly prosper in a bigoted world. Regardless of interpretation, the movie is tragic, but it serves a real purpose in its tragedy, and I find that beautiful. But the queer commentary of Jennifer's Body transgresses just the lesbian, also touching on the trans experience in a really powerful way. As I already discussed earlier, Jennifer undergoes a monstrous puberty of sorts when she is transformed into a succubus. You probably don't need me to tell you that for many queer and trans people, the prospect of puberty itself is quite horrific as bodies change in unwanted ways. Jennifer's transformation and her apprehension towards it definitely parallel the trans experience, giving the film a queer edge beyond just its lesbian angle. If you want a deeper exploration of the monstrous puberty in Jennifer's Body and the queer implications of it, I would again suggest the video I made about body horror being inherently queer on my channel. It's a video I'm very proud of, and there's a whole section about Jennifer's body toward the start, so give it a watch. But having explored the queer themes of Jennifer's body, I think we should transition into another important aspect of the film, how it plays with and subverts the male gaze. To talk about the male gaze in Jennifer's body, I think it really serves us well to first talk about what the male gaze even is and break down its history in horror movies as a whole. So let's do this teachable moment. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre first coined in 1943 the concept of the gaze. The concept is one where in the very act of one human gazing at another creates a power imbalance felt by both parties, wherein the person being gazed at is reduced to an object and not seen as a full human being. It might be beneficial here to imagine a zoo. When we go to the zoo, we stare at animals with a bizarre fascination to see what they'll do. In doing so, we reduce those animals to a spectacle and see them as objects for our own satisfaction. And we could definitely talk about the ethical nature of zoos, but I think it's pretty obvious to anyone that if you swap out your average giraffe or elephant for a real person, then that situation becomes rather problematic. In 1975, film theorist Laura Mulvey, who shares a birthday with me, like, yeah girl, Leo season or whatever, expanded on Sartre's concept and filtered it through the lens of cinema. She described a pattern wherein the female body on screen became the subject of the same power imbalance described by Sartre, where male characters, audiences, and even the camera itself all reduced women on screen to objects for male pleasure. Men became the gazers, and women the subjects of their gaze. And this concept is, of course, not new to cinema or even art in general. I mean, there are countless paintings and sculptures of nude women posed in unnatural ways for male viewers that date back millennia. But Mulvey really brought this idea into the mainstream and defined it outright. I think one of the most important things to remember when it comes to the male gaze on screen is that it can be, and often is, very subtle. While there are some pretty obvious examples of it, even films we enjoy can easily fall victim to the male gaze and present female characters in a reductive way. This brings us to horror, a genre you may or may not have noticed I absolutely love, but also one that really has a problem with the male gaze. Horror has always been an outsider genre of sorts, brushing against stuff like pornography and its explicit nature and taboo subject matter. As a result, many horror films lean into a hypersexual image. They advertise boobs and blood as their main draws and attract viewers just as much with reductive images of the female body as with real scares. There's an extensive history of horror films reducing the female body down to an object, either one for male desire or shock and violence, often both at the same time. And this makes Jennifer's Body, a horror film directed by a feminist, a perfect place for the male gaze to be subverted, challenged, and toyed with. Most obviously, I think the film seeks to reclaim the male gaze and bend it to serve a very specific feminist goal. Jennifer Check is undoubtedly sexualized in the film, that much is undisputable, but it's important for us to keep in mind that Jennifer wants to be sexualized. She wants to feel powerful via the attention of others. I mean, she literally feeds off men to sustain herself. And while a film using the male gaze reductively might make Jennifer a passive actor in her own sexualization, in Jennifer's Body, our titular character frequently takes control of the camera that we might expect to reduce her, and then exerts sexual power on her own terms, sparingly and as a lure. She receives an exaggerated and eager gaze, yes, but she's aware of it. In fact, it's what her character wants. I think the most telling moment in the film's exploration of the male gaze comes in my absolute favorite scene of the whole movie. After committing her first on-screen kill by seducing and luring a boy into the woods and then eating him, Jennifer takes a nude dive in a local lake. The scene, on paper, could have easily become a reductive one, the camera ogling Jennifer's nude body and reducing it to a show for viewers. But Kusama deftly balances Jennifer's sexuality and power here. The opening shot provides the closest thing we get to nudity here, a brief glimpse of Jennifer's body as she swims in this beautiful wide shot. When we do get a closer look of Jennifer, the camera does not linger on her body, instead it moves with her in a propulsive forward motion. It even seems seems to back away from her in this shot as she swims directly toward the camera, asserting her dominance over the audience in a way. As she climbs onto a dock, the camera is careful never to show all too much of her body, supporting this idea that the camera is in service of Jennifer here. She is in charge and demands to be looked at, but only in so much as she wants to allow. And this clever balance between sexualization and agency is found elsewhere in the film, where the camera is used to elevate Jennifer while not reducing her to an object. Chiefly, this technique of elevating Jennifer through the male gaze is used after she feeds on men, allowing the audience to feel firsthand the power she feels devouring others. Conversely, when Jennifer is weak and feels ugly, the camera doesn't frame her in a flattering way. She becomes, as Jennifer herself puts it, like one of the normal girls. And this helps to outline the harmful nature of Jennifer's obsession with appearance and her reliance on the validation of others. The male gaze here becomes not some way to attract male viewers, but a means of showing us Jennifer's experience in the film and the allure of sexuality for her. And it all has a payoff at the end of the movie when Needy is able to, unlike Jennifer, maintain her strength and become comfortable in her own skin. Whether she's framed in an elevated and empowering way or shot in unflattering angles, Needy is always in charge during the film's final moments. Even the opening, wherein viewers are led to believe that Needy is helpless, is recontextualized by the ending to show that she was always one step ahead, always strong and empowered no matter how she was framed by the camera. I do want to go back to the lesbian kiss in the film here and talk about that moment with the male gaze in mind. The kiss, as I already said, is stilted and designed for viewer pleasure, specifically male viewing pleasure. It embodies perfectly the male gaze in action, but I do believe it's deliberately used to challenge Jennifer's ideology and show to the audience that it's really messed up. Jennifer has, up to this moment, weaponized the male gaze to her own advantage. She's leaned into the idea of herself as a sexual object, but only in a way that she's comfortable with. I think this kiss is a prime example of that. Jennifer doesn't strip down for Needy or for the camera. She merely kisses Needy in an enticing and intimate way. The trouble of the scene comes in how it reduces Needy down to an object of male desire against her own will. We already know that Needy feels a true romantic attraction to Jennifer, but their kiss does not serve Needy's attraction at all. It's devoid of emotion and entirely sexual. In a film where the male gaze is so often subverted and basically never used against female characters, this scene sticks out as the only one wherein a woman is reduced by the camera. It leads us to really reflect on how Jennifer's use of the male gaze is inherently harmful. We spend so much time focused on Jennifer that we fail to really consider her victims. This scene makes us do that. Additionally, in sympathizing with Needy and understanding how the scene minimizes her identity, we can acknowledge that even while Jennifer might believe her relationship with the male gaze to be healthy, it's really just reductive to her as well. Remember that Jennifer's moments of confidence are forever fleeting and dependent on how attractive she believes herself to be in the eyes of men. Honestly, I could go on and on about the male gaze in this movie. I think Jennifer's body handles it so artfully and with such pointed precision that you could honestly write a thesis on it. I mean, the last chapter of this video has kind of been that. But digressing from all the male gaze stuff, I do want to dedicate this next chapter to the leading lady of the whole thing, the criminally underappreciated Megan Fox. When I was a kid, I can vividly remember the Michael Bay Transformers movies being basically the biggest thing in the world. Those movies promoted a lot of isms and phobias, to say the least. They are shining examples of how mean-spirited and unrealistic mainstream 2000s cinema could be, and amidst all that mess was Megan Fox, the main love interest of the first two Transformers movies, and an actress who was consistently painted as a sexual object and subject of the male gaze in them. That's sadly how I was introduced to Megan, and while we've discussed the reevaluation of Jennifer's body throughout this video, I have to mention the reevaluation of Fox's reputation and career in recent years that I couldn't be happier about. I don't see Fox reduced to a sex symbol or the object of male desire much anymore. She's appreciated for the strong and talented actress she is and has always been. But that wasn't always the case, and in 2009, right off the back of films like Transformers, Fox was still very much perceived in an extremely sexist way. As we already discussed, if Jennifer's body has become notorious for anything, it's towards the film's marketing, which pandered not to the women the film might have truly resonated with, but to teenage boys that the marketing team thought would turn up to gawk at Fox. It's extremely ironic that a film titled Jennifer's Body, in part as a subtle jab towards the idea of predatorily staring at the body of a woman, was marketed as a vehicle to do just that. But the film is dead set on subverting preconceptions about Megan herself and other perceived sex symbols like her. Where a lesser movie might paint a character like Jennifer Check as flawless and more than content to be the object of male desire, Jennifer's Body shows the painful reality of being a sex symbol, of tying your self-worth to external validation, of playing an unsustainable part. And it's worth acknowledging how Megan Fox, as an actress so often pigeonholed as a sexual object and nothing more, was able to resonate so profoundly to this character and bring her to life like no other actress could. To really understand Fox's portrayal of Jennifer, I think it serves us well to first analyze this quote from her on the character in an interview for Vulture magazine. As Fox says, quote, "I think in general I'm a much more vulnerable person than people realize. I'm very permeable, and I was at a place in my life and in my career and dealing with fame where I felt I was really struggling with that. So I was sort of raw and very open, but also trying to constantly cover it by kind of adopting a Jennifer Check-esque persona in my own life, which was an affect. I wasn't really totally genuine, so I think it just happened. I happened to be the right person to play this character at that time because I was kind of living a microcosm of it already, if that makes sense." What Fox describes here is a real-life experience that so strongly parallels that of the fictional Jennifer that it's impossible to ignore. Jennifer is a performance, literally and in the context of the film. I think the most interesting thing Fox brings to the role is her ability to subtly convey the cracks beneath Jennifer's external, strong persona. Sometimes that's written directly into the script. I think about Jennifer crying and applying her makeup before the dance as a key example of just that, but moments like Jennifer's expression as she's driven away to be sacrificed, her fleeting moments of sadness as Needy judges her for consuming others, moments like these are much less obvious and much more difficult to pull off believably as an actor. But Fox does it all so effortlessly. It really lends this deeper layer to every other moment she has in the movie, and I have to assume so much of that is because Fox was living the life of Jennifer in a way, hiding her own pain behind a mask of self-confidence. Jennifer is a character study on self-image. I think almost any girl can relate to having a shit week or day, but still getting up in the morning and putting on an act of stability, moving with poise, and not talking about your problems because you feel it's what's expected from you as a woman. As a famous woman, literally known for your good looks and image, I have to assume that struggle is so much worse, and that's a key reason why Fox is just so perfect here. She brings this undeniable connection to the material that I don't feel any other actor could have brought to the performance. Fox is directly challenging the preconceptions one might have about herself and archetypes like that of the sex symbol in popular media. So Fox's performance here is so great in part because it serves as a meta-commentary on her entire real-world career. But to stop our analysis there would be doing a massive disservice to everything else that Fox does to make her performance so great. Another reason why I think Fox works so well here is because the film is tailor-made to support and emphasize her acting. Fox is doing a lot with this character, using outdated and self-created slang, making the most exaggerated facial expressions, and always dressing on 10. In a different film, that could definitely become too much. But Jennifer's Body as a movie is specially made to allow for performance of this kind. Most important here is the use of tone. Jennifer's Body is campy to an extreme, and I feel as though the film is entirely aware of that. Jennifer actually becomes kind of an audience surrogate in certain scenes, especially those that are supposed to be melodramatic. I specifically think of how Needy gives this empowering narrated speech about how her high school started to heal in the wake of a tragedy, and then Jennifer is, in the next scene, openly asking, who cares? The Jennifer performance is one that calls so much attention to itself, but when the film makes obvious the camp nature of the movie as a whole, and even does so directly through Jen, again, that performance really avoids becoming jarring or out of place. And the emotional moments still hit, it's just that there's always a bit of playful comedy sprinkled around them. Pretty fitting for a film born out of early internet culture, especially the post 9/11 internet culture that always carried this kind of cynical and sarcastic worldview informed by ever-present tragedy. In fact, I think it might be safe to say that the diner fire tragedy in Jennifer's Body is a direct means of touching on 9/11 and trauma response. I mean, Jennifer literally orders a 9/11 tribute drink from the bar moments before it burns down, so do with that information whatever you will. But yeah, the entire movie is a camp masterpiece, and Megan Fox's performance is designed to play on that camp nature, giving us another reason as to why she's absolutely perfect for this role. Beyond that, there are all these subtle and small acting choices Fox makes here that I adore, ones that make the performance something best witnessed firsthand, so I'll stop my praises here. Fox gives what is honestly one of my favorite horror performances, period. And I know it's a tired phrase, but I think she really did just understand the assignment. Like, there's not a better way to explain it than that. Honestly, I would put this up against like Toni Collette in Hereditary or Willem Dafoe in The Lighthouse for just how well Fox matches the tone of the movie and does her job perfectly. And I find it pretty sad that Fox is more known for her roles in movies like Transformers and those awful Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies from the 2010s. She's just an amazing actress, and that shines through perfectly in Jennifer's Body. I would love to see her given the space to flex her abilities in the future. There is a horror film she starred in from 2021 called Tell Death that seems to have good reviews, so maybe some of you might be interested in checking that out to see some more of Fox's acting talents in a horror context. I know it's a movie I will be interested to watch if I find the time. But yeah, in my opinion, Fox kind of carries Jennifer's Body. There is an immense amount of talent here. Diablo Cody, Karyn Kusama, Amanda Seyfried, Johnny Simmons, Adam Brody, J.K. Simmons, Amy Sedaris. These are just a few of the names attached to Jennifer's Body. So make no mistake that the film is one built by a bunch of extremely talented people. But everything falls apart without Fox. Her performance is the backbone of the movie and easily my favorite aspect of it, so I figured it only fitting for us to delve into her work in depth and explore what makes it so perfect. I said at the start of this video we were doing an extensive analysis of Jennifer's Body, and I was dead serious. We are taking everything into account here. I have already discussed in passing the reasons why this movie was named Jennifer's Body in the first place. The title is both a joke to the audience, playing on the idea that they are going to watch Jennifer's Body, and a serious hint at the central conflict of the film. Jennifer reduces herself down to the body, her strength and sexual desirability becoming one and the same. But Jennifer's Body is a vehicle for her mind, personality, and life as a whole. We are watching Jennifer's Body, yes, but the goal of the film is to make us see beyond that surface vessel into the human underneath it all. However, the title is most obviously derived from a 1994 song of the same name, so I think it's more than worth exploring the meaning, background, and story of that song. Jennifer's Body, the song, was written and recorded by the band Hole, fronted by the infamous Courtney Love. I have my own issues with Love. I think most everyone who really knows about her does, but I can't deny that she's made some amazing music and that her work with Hole was revolutionary for 90s and 2000s alt as a whole. See what I did there? The album on which Jennifer's Body appears, the group's sophomore release titled Live Through This, is easily my favorite of the band's material, and it's crammed full of songs that reject the restrictive boxes of womanhood, displaying real feminine angst while still embracing femininity itself. Love is actually extremely well known for her use of an aesthetic dubbed kinder horror, wherein she would wear clothes and makeup that were hyper-feminine to an almost unnatural extent, and then subverted all that exaggerated femininity in both her appearance and actions. The cover of Live Through This somewhat embodies that aesthetic, featuring an over-the-top embodiment of feminine excess with makeup running down her face and photographed at a bit of an unflattering moment. Obviously, this brand of feminism and its simultaneous embrace and rejection of the constraints of femininity is well suited to Jennifer's Body, the film, a movie that, as we've already shown, plays with femininity in the same way. Beyond just the song that the movie gets its name from, Jennifer's Body is deeply tied to Hole and its musical output, especially Live Through This. But that's not to say the song Jennifer's Body in particular isn't one of the leading influences on the film. The track itself is one about a woman serving a man, becoming an accessory for his pleasure. While he feeds on her sexually, she starves for more. The lyrics paint a disturbing image of this unhealthy relationship as Courtney Love uses the imagery of dismemberment to show how the woman is reduced to pieces by her partner, who treats her as little more than an object. In Love's own words, quote, "You are hungry, but I'm starving. He cuts you down from the tree. He keeps you in a box by the bed, alive, but just barely." The horror of the song is perhaps its most defining feature, making it rather fitting that Jennifer's Body, the film, is rooted in horror and directly draws from the song in what is probably its most disturbing scene. Jennifer's sacrifice at the hands of men strongly parallels the killing in the song, where our female protagonist is cut to pieces by her male lover. The murder in the track is likely metaphoric, but if you want to read the track as supernatural and literal, then the interpretation is definitely there. Both iterations of Jennifer's Body play on the very real horror of men assaulting and harming women, linking them at their core. But these two pieces of media do differ in a variety of interesting ways. Most notably, the film flips the song's central dichotomy of a woman being forced to starve while male pleasure is prioritized, instead telling a story wherein feminine sexual hunger takes center stage. Jennifer dominates men who we might conventionally expect to dominate her instead, completely subverting what we might assume the film to be, having only heard the song. Additionally, the film is a lot less poetic and left up to interpretation than the whole track. Obviously, we can point to the fact that the song is a piece of music and thus less tied to a clear narrative to explain away this discrepancy, but I think there's something a little more interesting at play here. As I already said, the whole song is a tragic one, telling a somber tale about a man abusing and exploiting a woman. Jennifer's Body, the film, while still tragic in many ways, presents itself as much more of a fun and enjoyable experience, one where the serious abuse of women is only made uncomfortably real in a select few scenes. I would suggest that Love's poetic and abstract lyrics are designed specifically to not fall into exploitative or overwhelming territory, something the film doesn't have to worry about so much. Both iterations of Jennifer's Body were made by women, and I think it checks out that these women would be hyper aware of the negative impacts of describing or showing feminine abuse in uncomfortable detail through their art. While Jennifer's Body, the film, steers clear of truly unsettling content beyond a few deliberate moments, the song dives headfirst into a world that hits way too close to home and might border on the exploitative if not for Love's restraint and artful touch in her lyrics. While I don't think the song is required listening for watching the film, I definitely think the movie and the track pair well with one another. They offer radically different experiences and stories, but they're united in theme and ideology. I love them both, and I hope after seeing this video, you'll consider giving each one some of your time. Before we end the video with a wider conclusion about everything we've discussed so far, I think we've earned some fun, chill content. So let's talk about the soundtrack of Jennifer's Body, one of the most delightfully fun aspects of the film. A few people have linked this movie to Twilight, and outside of the gloomy setting and supernatural undertones, I don't really see the connection. But I do see a link between the movies soundtrack-wise, since both films are packed with only the most nostalgic late 2000s bangers. Twilight had Paramore and Radiohead, and Jennifer's Body has Panic at the Disco and also Paramore, kind of. It's just Haley Williams. But it's obvious that the movie really appreciates 2000s emo, and the soundtrack reflects it. New Perspective by Panic is fun and catchy, just a shining example of how good the band could be in their early days. Haley Williams' song Teenagers is a very welcome addition, and Florence and the Machine have a great track here in Kiss with a Fist, a song that gives Jennifer's Body, in my opinion, its most noticeable needle drop. And I Would Be Being the Fool, not to mention Through the Trees, the in-universe song by fictional band Low Shoulder, the scummy guys who murder Jennifer. It becomes a massive joke in the film, but it's actually not that bad, so I'm still wondering why the band had to kill Jennifer in order to be successful. Low Shoulder also have another great song in the movie titled In the Flesh that, while it's not up there with Through the Trees, is still super catchy and really suits the prom scene where it gets performed. I also want to briefly make note of the more underground bands on the soundtrack. My favorite easily have to be The Sword, who have their song Celestial Crown used in my favorite scene of the movie, the one where Jennifer goes for a post-murder swim. It's a short, instrumental, hard rock / metal type song, very different from everything else featured here, but still just so freaking good. And of course, we get a whole song here, but it's not the one you might expect. Jennifer's Body, the song, is entirely absent from this soundtrack, and we instead get another classic from Live Through This, Violet. It's the song that plays over the ending, and I couldn't think of a better track to close out the movie with. Just such a fitting addition to this film, and one that puts a nice bow on it all. I really love this soundtrack. If you couldn't already tell, it's one of the most enjoyable parts of Jennifer's Body, and every track basically hits for me. And while we're already discussing some fun and enjoyable extras from Jennifer's Body, I think it's only right that I mention the film has a tie-in graphic novel written by Rick Spears that, from what I understand, provides a canonical expansion on the movie's plot. I would have loved to include a section about that graphic novel in this video, but sadly, the book cost a bit over $100 and I am absolutely broke. So if this video gets like 200,000 views, I'll make a video about the comic book using YouTube money. If you want to make that more likely, please like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff that helps the channel grow. But with that being said, I think I've covered everything I wanted to about Jennifer's Body. So conclusions time. It wasn't so long ago that I watched Jennifer's Body for the first time. For some reason, I think I had been avoiding the movie for a while. But once I hit my spring break a few months back, I finally gave myself a real day off, laid down in bed, and just put the movie on. Not trying to think all too hard about its messaging or deeper themes, just enjoying it plainly. By the time I finished the movie, I just felt so, for lack of a better word, good. It was such a fun and inventive film that made me feel seen in a lot of ways, and while I didn't take notes on it or try to look for deeper themes in the moment, the movie's messaging really stuck with me in the days after my initial viewing. I just knew I had to write something about it, and that's where the script for this video came from. A real desire to explore and understand a movie that I just found to be so comforting and enjoyable. It's hard for me to see how anyone could watch this movie now and not, at the least, appreciate it. Even harder for me to understand how an entire audience of critics and viewers in 2009 could dismiss this as just another piece of Twilight knockoff trash. What Jennifer's Body most obviously gives us is a lesson in judging and writing off films, a cautionary tale of how studio mishaps and audience failings can cause a real work of genius to be left behind in our fast-paced media market. But the real reason why it sucks so much that Jennifer's Body was forgotten for a time is because of what else the film gives us: a deconstruction of the male gaze in horror cinema, a serious analysis of queer romance, a narrative about the struggles of puberty for young girls, and much, much more. So often I see this movie reduced down to a great film that people got wrong, but it's so important to center our conversations on Jennifer's Body around what exactly makes the movie so great, because the film is a goldmine of interesting ideas. I hope that in making an hour-long video on the movie, I at the very least convinced you of that much. This channel is all about trying to appreciate media on a deeper level, and I felt like Jennifer's Body was a perfect film for that type of deeper exploration. It's also a movie I just really enjoy. It's a movie that has clung to cultural relevancy for years, gone through multiple reappraisals, and absolutely defied the boxes others have tried limiting it to, and that's because of the amazing editing, the stellar effects, the perfect soundtrack, the thoughtful writing, the expert direction, and really just all the talented work that went into crafting this masterful film. There's no other movie quite like it, and for that reason and many more, I think we'll be watching Jennifer's Body for a long, long time to come. And that concludes my video on Jennifer's Body. I hope you all got something valuable from it. I know I put a lot of effort into this one, and I really hope that reflected in the quality. So yeah, as you might be able to tell, I'm filming this much later than I recorded the video, probably like 2 months later if we're being honest. I'm in a new dorm. I have a new microphone. Let me know in the comments if you think the new microphone sounds better than the old one, but yeah, a lot has changed. But yeah, this is my longest video to date.
I think that's pretty obvious. And to create long form content like this requires a lot. It requires a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of support on the part of my audience. Oh my God, my hair won't part correctly. So the difference with long form content is that I can't really just pump out videos on a regular basis like some other YouTubers can. And for that reason, I do really rely on you guys to like share my videos and just get them out to a general audience, make sure they're successful so that I can like pay for my life. But yeah, all that being said, the best way to support me is of course on Patreon. If you haven't already checked out the Patreon, I would 100% recommend you do that because it is awesome. I work really hard to produce some original content over there and share content with people on Patreon early. Patrons actually got to see this video an entire week early. So if that sounds interesting to you, I would definitely go over there and check it out. There is a video all about my Patreon on like the homepage of my channel. So definitely look into that. Would really appreciate it. Another perk of being on Patreon is you get a shout out if you're in the $10 tier or above. So I am here to shout out some patrons. Special thanks to Heyu Smith, Sophie, Alex, Grace, and Kaya. And of course, a thank you to all my patrons in general. It is your support that literally keeps my channel going. Yeah, I hope you guys are as excited for the future of the channel as I am. I'm working on all new videos right now, looking to produce some more types of content, maybe some more comic book stuff like the Spider-Verse video I just did. But yeah, feel free to let me know in the comments any content suggestions you have going forward. Until then, though, I have been Ellie. You have been wonderful. And until next time, bye.